This is the webinar on middle school team scheduling. Even though the webinar is going to focus on a middle school scenario, please realize that the concepts we're going to discuss in terms of separating students out into teams and scheduling them as such can be applied to high schools as well. If you have a scenario where you have ninth grade academies or something of that nature, you could take the items we're going to discuss today and apply them to a high school as well. Now, we're starting this scenario assuming that your data from the previous school year has already been moved up to the new school year. If that hasn't been done, we have a webinar recording on school year maintenance and getting the new year started, and you could refer to that to move your information into the new school year. Once that's been done, there are some overall parameters we're going to take a look at to make sure that you have the scheduling in the new school year set up the way you intend. I'm going to start by coming to the Admin menu and Database Configuration and the Scheduling tab. In the scheduling area, you can control how many days are in your scheduling cycle. So if you have a 2-day alternating schedule, you could set the number of days to 2. You can change the labels of these days. You are limited to 1 character for each day, but you can use numbers or letters. Over to the right, you can indicate how many periods per day you're offering. And you have control over the preference label. These are how the periods will be labeled when you look at and print student schedules. You can enter up to 2 characters here for the period labels, and those can be numbers or letters or both. Just a word about the number of periods per day. If you have a scenario where you're using block scheduling, and so let's say you have a 2-day schedule and the students will be attending 4 blocks on one day and 4 other blocks on the other day, it's fairly typical for a school then to set up their scheduling so that they are set to 8 periods per day. And then in the schedule rotation, which we'll look at a little later, you could indicate that 4 of those blocks meet on one day of your scheduling cycle and the other 4 meet on the other day in your scheduling cycle. So realize that that option about the periods per day could be very straightforward and represent how many periods you offer each day, but you can also be a little creative with it. And in terms of a block schedule where you might have a rotation, as I mentioned, you could, for scheduling purposes, for putting the students into the classes, indicate, or use a situation where you're envisioning an 8-period day and then split it up into those separate blocks after the fact. You can also adjust the number of periods if you want to have some after-school activities included in the student schedules. You could increase the number of periods per day and label one to indicate that it's the after-school or before-school period. And we've also had scenarios where schools will take their lunch periods and in essence have 3 periods to represent lunch A, lunch B, lunch C. So you can be a little creative with the number of periods that you're offering in a school day. This screen also lets you control how long your course codes are and how long your section codes are. You can also indicate if you are using a schedule rotation. Typically, when you're in the process of scheduling the students, you leave this set to no. Even if you do employ a rotation, you would want to wait until after the students are scheduled, and then you can come back here and change this to yes, so that when you view those schedules and print those schedules out, it reflects that rotation. But for the purpose of scheduling, you would leave that set to no initially. And you can also activate the feature to track entry and exit dates. This would record the dates that students either entered a section or left a section. So if you'd like to record that information as you make schedule changes throughout the year, you can activate that. If you do activate it, pay attention to the date range you've selected, and typically schools will set the start date to represent sometime after the beginning of school, so maybe they allow themselves a week or two to make final adjustments to student schedules before they start recording those entry and exit dates. Since I'm going to be in the midst of the scheduling process, I'm going to leave that set to no for now. Again, you can come back and activate it later. I'm also going to come down to the school menu and the Edit Scheduling Term Definitions area. Here's where you control the terms or the lengths of the different classes that you offer. And you want to make sure that you've created an option for each of the different lengths that you offer for your classes so that as you create the sections, you can associate them accordingly. If you don't have anything here, you can select a default option based on whether you operate under quarters, trimesters, 6 terms, etc., and store those defaults. And even if you store the defaults, you can make adjustments as necessary. Now in my scenario, I offer year-long classes starting week 1 and ending week 36 of the school year. You could also have semester options, and you can see with the start and ending week, you would indicate the weeks that those run. So semester 1 would be week 1 through 18. Semester 2 would be week 19 through 36. If you offer quarter-long classes, those are 9-week sessions, so you can see that my starting and ending weeks reflect that. And often a middle school might have a scenario where the exploratory or unified arts classes operate under a different term. They don't fit into the quarter designation. They meet for 6 weeks or 7 weeks, some other designation. So I've set up options for my 6 rotations where the weeks represent that these are 6-week classes. Later on, you can come back in and enter the date ranges here as well. That's going to be important if you're having your teachers take attendance through MMS, because the system will look here to see what the date ranges are and what the current date is, so it knows what classes to show the teacher. Because, in the middle of September, we want to show the teachers their year-long classes, their quarter 1 classes, and their rotation 1 classes. We don't want to show them all the other classes that will occur later in the year when they're taking attendance. So if you have teachers take attendance during individual class periods, you would want to come in here and enter the start and end date for each of those different terms. When I close out of here, I'm going to get a message that I need to enter those start and stop dates. And I'll do that later once my calendar is determined. So with those basic parameters set up, what I'm going to look at next is assigning my students into teams. It's fairly common in middle schools and increasingly actually in high schools for freshman academies for students to be divided into teams. And while some schools choose to figure out which students will be on which team, and they do that totally outside of MMS, you can use the system to split the students out for you, even based on whatever criteria you want to use for that. I'm going to be creating teams for my 8th graders and 7th graders, and I'm going to do the 2 of them slightly differently. And in both cases, I want the system to split the students out so that my special ed students and my students who are signed up for advanced math get distributed evenly among those teams. So the first thing you want to think of is, what criteria do you want to use as you split the students into teams? And if there are certain factors that you try to distribute evenly among the teams. In order to do that through MMS, you need to make sure that that information is recorded in the student biographical records. Now in my case, I'm going to be focusing on special ed and upper level math. So in the user-defined area, I have a tab for special ed where students have a designation of yes or no. And as I split the students into teams, I'm going to tell the system to distribute those special ed students among the teams. And I also, over on tab number 12 here, have recorded if students are in algebra. Now, I have this set up as a field for algebra. You might create a field that just indicates math level, and then you can assign to the students, you know, high, middle, low, whatever designation you want. But as long as the information is in the biographical part of the system, then we can have the system create teams that distribute the students based on that information. And all of this that I'm about to do to create the teams would be a temporary step. I'm going to create a course and some sections to put my students into teams, and then later I'll remove the team courses from the student records so I can schedule them into their actual classes. So this is all kind of an intermediate process to get the system to do the work of splitting up those teams. So the first thing I need to do is create in my course catalog courses that designate the teams. So I'm going to come to the school menu and edit course catalog. I already have a team here for my 7th graders. I'm going to add one for my 8th graders. So I'll simply click on the yellow plus and call this Team 8 and click OK and simply give it a name. Some schools, when they create these team classes, they make sure that the course code is such that it would force this to fall to the bottom of their list of classes in the course catalog. So if that means putting a Z in front of the course code for these team courses, you can go ahead and do that. I think schools like to do that just so that the team courses stay at the bottom of the list of courses and kind of are separated out and easy to find when they're working with them. So because all of my other course codes are numbers, my team courses float to the bottom of this list. Now that I've created those team courses, I'm going to assign them to the students. Now in my scenario, at this point, the students don't have any course requests. So if I was to look at the student at the student schedule records, no one has courses yet. I'm going to go to the schedule menu and operations and mass edit these team courses into the student records. So I'm going to use the Course Add tab, and we'll do our 7th graders first. So I'll assign Team 7, and I can go to the Edit Condition tab and select either grade level or year of grad, whichever you prefer. And I'll select 7th grade and click Apply. And when I process, it will assign Team 7 to the 157 7th graders that I have. I can then change this to Team 8 and go to my condition and change the grade level to 8 and apply that. And when I process, it's assigned Team 8 to the 169 8th graders that I have. Next, I'm going to come to School and edit course sections, and I'm going to create sections for these team classes. So I'm going to click on the yellow plus and I'll come first to Team 7. Now I'm going to handle the two teams or the two grade levels differently. For Team 7, I'm going to create 6 teams. These are basically going to be the groups that the students are going to move through all their academic classes with. So if you have a scenario where when a student is put on a team, they stay with that group of 20 or 30 students all throughout their academic subjects, you'd follow a scenario like this. So I have 170 something 7th graders, and I want to split them into classroom size teams. So I'm going to create 6 sections of Team 7. At this point, it doesn't matter what period they meet because this is simply an intermediate step. I'm not going to leave them scheduled into this class. However, I do need to set the maximum so it's appropriate. And if these groups are going to be the students' homerooms, you could assign teachers and rooms at this point also. So if you know, okay, for my 7 or 6 7th grade teachers, I'm going to assign one to each of these team groups, you could assign the room and the teachers now. So I'll just create 5 more of these, and for each one, I'll give it the same maximum. Okay, so again, with my 7th grade example, I'm splitting the students up into teams that are classroom size, and my intention is they're going to travel with that same group of students through their various classes. The 8th grade I'm going to handle a little differently. I have, about 170 8th graders, and what I'm going to do is simply split them into 2 major teams, and within those teams students can kind of float around. So I'm going to create a section of Team 8 that will be a larger group, so that I just have 2 large teams for my 8th graders. Now, ultimately, what I'm going to do is schedule the students into those team sections using the student scheduler. One of the advantages of the student scheduler is that it will pay attention to the filter that I'm running in MMS and put the students in those sections accordingly. So because the student scheduler is going to pay attention to the filter, I'm going to create a filter for the purposes of team scheduling, or putting the students into teams, that orders the students based on the criteria that I want to use to separate the students out. So I'm going to come to the school menu and filters queries, and I'm going to create a new filter, and this will be the one I use to schedule my Team 7. I'll create that. On the biographical tab, I'm going to add 2 criteria. One is I'm going to be looking for active students, so I'll choose the EMF_flag field and make sure the value is A for active and add that condition to the list. And the other criteria is that the students have a grade level of 7. This ensures that I just have my 7th graders in place when I use this filter. The Order tab is where I'm going to control the order in which the students are listed and also the order in which they're scheduled into these team sections. So the criteria I was interested in using to split the students out were the special ed designation, And so I want to choose the data item or the field where I'm storing that information, which is sped code in my case, so I'll move that over. I was also interested in their math level. Now I have that in user-defined field 14, so I'll move that over. Typically, you also want to break the teams out evenly by gender, so I'll move the sex field over. And if we wanted to add a little randomness then, we could pick a field such as middle name, so the students are kind of randomized within these other criteria. So I'll process that. There are my 157 students. If I say yes, I want to see the listing, it doesn't show me who's special ed and who has different math levels, but you can see that I have my females first because gender is one of the items I'm using to sort the students, and then my males come second. So I'll exit and save that filter, and then I'm also going to go right back to school and filters queries and create a similar one for my 8th graders. I'll do the same thing, looking for active students. These students will be grade level 8, and I'll use the same sort order. Special ed, my user-defined field for the math levels, gender, and middle name. Okay, when I close out of the filter area, whatever filter I was just working on becomes my filter in MMS. So now I just have my 8th graders that I'm working with. If I come to Schedule, Operations, and Student Scheduler, and Process, what the system's going to do is look at any course requests that are in the student records. At this point, the only course request is the team course. It's going to look at the sections that I have for that team course, and it's going to be very methodical in putting the students into those sections. It's going to look at my student range, which is in order based on the criteria I set in the filter. It will take the first student, put them in the first section for the Team 8 class. Second student will go in the second section. Third student will go in the first section. Fourth student will go in the second section. And it's going to alternate through. And that process, combined with the order I used in my filter, is going to ensure that I have balanced teams based on the criteria that's important to me. So I'll process this. And if I go back to school and edit course sections and come down to Team 8, I'll see first of all that my numbers are pretty balanced for the enrollment into those sections. If I now come to Schedule and Print Class Lists, and I choose my 2 8th grade teams, I'm going to come to the Report Layout tab, and I'm going to ask to also see the designation based on sped code and the user-defined field where I have the math levels listed. It's also going to show me the student's gender, and when I print this, I'll be able to see if this is balanced the way that I wanted. So here's my first team, and if I look at the columns for special ed and algebra, first of all, I have all the students who are not special ed, and then I come to, or I start to come to the students who are in my upper level math. and then also the students who are special ed. So in this case, I have 8 students who are in upper level math and 5 students who are designated special ed. And here are my numbers for males and females. Let's compare that to my second team. Okay, so I start with the algebras. 3, 4, 5. I have 7 algebras in this case, 5 special ed, 49 males, and 35 females. So you can see that even though I've got more boys than girls, the numbers are balanced between the two teams. I have a relatively similar number between both teams. I also have a similar number of the upper level math students in each team and the special ed students in each team. So if I switch to my 7th grade team filter, and again go to Scheduling Operations and Student Scheduler, if I look at my enrollment numbers in the course sections, okay, we'll see that for Team 7, those 6 sections are pretty well balanced. And again, if we look at the class lists for those, we should see similar numbers for each of our criteria among those teams. One math, 2 special ed. Next one has 1 math, 1 special ed, and we see similar breakdowns for the other teams. So often after I create those teams or split the students into those teams, I'll look at the class list under that team filter so I can easily see if the criteria I was interested in distributing did in fact get distributed the way I wanted. You could also switch back to your filter that puts the students in order by name and take a look at the class lists in that order. Often at this point, you want to look at those lists of who's in what team, and if there are combinations of students that don't look good, or you want to make any changes, now's the time to do that. So if you want to move a student from one team to another, you would go into the student schedule record, and you would highlight the team or the section, click on the yellow plus, and choose to replace that section with another. Let me see, he was in section 6, so I will replace that. I'll pick team 7 and pick one of the other sections and move the student from section 6 to section 4, let's say. And now I've moved that student to a different team designation. Once you verified that the students are broken up into those teams the way you want them to, and you've made any changes that are necessary, while they're still in these intermediate team classes, you can use that information to help you mass edit the team names into the student records. So I'm going to come back to my school menu and filters queries, And I'm going to create a filter simply called Team. I'm going to use this to identify the students in each of those different team sections. And here again, I'm just going to look for active students. But what I'm really going to focus on here is the Scheduling tab, where I can check off the option to include the scheduling criteria. And under course enrollment, I can say find any student who has course Team 8, check off the option for the section. And if I add that to the list, this filter is going to give me just the students in Section 1 of the 8th grade team. If I save that, now I can come to the biographical menu and operations and mass edit the team name into the student biographical records. So I'd find the team name field, and I could assign blue. The only students in my student range are the ones in this particular section. And in the biographical records, I'll see that team name on the first tab. And you also see the team name up in the blue area, so you'll always see their designation. Then I could come back to the filter, select that team filter I created, and edit it by going to the Scheduling tab, removing Section 1, and this time telling it to find the students in Team 8, Section 2. And that will overwrite the other filter I had, and now I can mass edit the students into team, let's do black. I'm not going to do the same thing with the 7th graders just in the interest of time, but you can see how you can use that intermediate filter to identify the students who are in a particular section and then mass edit their team names in that way. What I can do with my 7th graders, though, the ones who are now scheduled into teams, because I had put them into those separate, class size teams, I could use the deposit homeroom feature and tell the system to take whatever teacher and room the student's assigned to in that section and make that the student's homeroom and homeroom teacher, if that's the procedure you typically use. That function is under the biographical menu and operations and deposit homerooms. And here's where I could tell it, in week 1, take whatever class the student is assigned to first period. And because the only thing the students have in their schedules right now is that team class, it will take the teacher in the room that I've assigned to that particular section and make that the student's homeroom. This option down here, if you want to record the homeroom teacher's name, select the field in which to store that. So that would be the homeroom teacher. And then when I process, that will add that information to those students. So any of those students, in my case, who were in Section 1, they're going to be assigned to Homeroom 101 with Mr. Black. The other sections I didn't assign a room or a teacher, but I do have the students in that first section designated now. So that's how you can use the system to divide the students into teams, and that process that we just went through. Our high schools who have freshman academies typically use that same process that divides the students into those different academies, and then they can schedule them accordingly. Now, in the case of my 8th graders, I mass edited their team name based on which Team 8 section they had been assigned to. For my 7th graders, if I use that deposit homeroom feature, I can now use the homeroom to indicate what team they're on. So still under my Team 7 filter, I could come to the operation to mass edit, and I can mass edit the team name. We'll make them green, and under set condition, I can now say find anyone whose homeroom is 101 and give them the green team designation. And so now anyone who's in homeroom 101 will have that team designation. Once those team names are in there, that's really going to help you out in terms of assigning students to various classes and courses. So the work that we did to split the students up into the teams with those team courses is also we can assign the homerooms to the students if necessary, and especially get that team designation in their biographical record. Now at this point, I'd like to talk a little bit about the course catalog and how you can structure that to make your scheduling process efficient. So I'm going to come to the school menu and edit course catalog. And the way that you number your courses is really going to depend on the structure you use for scheduling these teams. So you might have a scenario like we looked at with our 7th graders where a team is basically a classroom-sized group of students, and you might have them traveling together through all of their academic classes and through all of their specialty unified arts exploratory classes. You might have a scenario where a team is a larger group, and you have one team that could consist of 4 teachers, and therefore, 4 classroom-sized groups of students, and the students rotate through those 4 teachers. But they could have different classmates in their various academic classes. So, you need to think about, do your students stay with a particular group of students all throughout the day, or are they mixed within their team, or are they sometimes mixed within the entire grade level? And you can structure your course codes to reflect that so that you don't run the risk of a student being moved from, one team class to another just because of the course codes. I'm going to focus in this example on language arts, but obviously you can apply the same concept to all of your other courses. First of all, course codes can reflect grade levels, and the course codes can reflect teams. So in my 7th grade example, where I have the students in those really specific smaller groups, I could have a different course code for each one of those teams. And then if I assign all of my students on the green team to course 171, I'm keeping them separate from the teams that I'm going to give different course codes to. So remember, my 7th grade example, the students are in classroom-sized teams. For my 8th graders, remember I have those in larger groups, so each team is about 85 students. In my 8th grade example, the students are on those smaller teams, but they can rotate through the teachers on that team, and it's okay with me if they are with different students or different classmates from their team in different academic classes. They don't have to be with the same exact group of students in their English class as they are in their social studies class, for instance. So what I could do for my 8th graders is just create 2 language arts courses. Okay, so one of these I'm going to simply label 186A, and this will be Language Arts 8A. I already have a section of this in my course section area, so I'm just going to update that course code. And then I'm going to create another 8th grade language arts course. And this will be 8B. And what I'll do then is all of the students on one of my 8th grade teams will be assigned 186A, and the ones on the other team will be assigned 186B. And again, by giving the students on different teams different course codes, I'm ensuring that they don't ever accidentally, throughout the scheduling process, get moved to a different team. So if you haven't used this method before of course codes that reflect the teams, it's worth investing some time to set up your course catalog accordingly, because it can save you hassle as you're scheduling, because when the students on the different teams have course codes that represent the team and are separate from the other team course codes, you're ensuring that the students stay within those teams as you schedule. Now for your exploratories or unified arts, you want to think about what your policy is for scheduling the students into those. Now some schools, they want the students to stay with their team as they move to the unified arts or exploratories. If that's the case, you would want to make sure that the course codes for those unified arts classes are team specific, so that the students stay with their team as they move through those. However, if your policy is once it comes to the exploratory, students can be mixed with any other students from the grade level, regardless of what team they're on, you could just have general course codes. So for instance, I could have one course code for Art 7 and one course code for Art 8. Let me just save those. Okay, and then when I assign these courses to the students, all of the 7th graders will get the same art course assigned to them and, be blended and mixed accordingly. So the course codes play a big part in how your scheduling process proceeds, and you can adjust the course codes to reflect your scheduling policy. Just remember, if the students stay with their team for courses, create team-specific course codes and assign them to the students. And if the students can be with any student from the grade level, regardless of team, then you can have a general course code for those particular courses. So let's next talk about how you assign courses to the students so that they get scheduled accordingly. There are times when at a middle school level the students don't have any course requests in their record until you put them in there. So typically what you would do is assign the students to their teams first, and once you've split them out into teams, then start assigning them to the particular courses. I'm going to first do an example with 7th grade. And now that my students are split out into their teams, I'm going to go to the Schedule menu, Operations, Mass Edit Student Course Requests, and at this point I can remove that team course from their records. So I can go to Course Drop, and drop Team 7 from all my 7th graders. Now, I would do this after I had either assigned the team names to the students in biographical or used the deposit homerooms. You know, once I've made sure there's something in the biographical system that indicates what team each student is on. If you want to use the sections of the team that the students are in to assign them to their courses, you could do that first and then remove the team from their schedule. And by this I mean, under the conditional add, you could come in and say, for everyone who's on or in Team 7 Section 2, I want to assign them to, you know, Language Arts 138, and I want to assign them to Math 238, etc. And, you know, any appropriate art classes, music classes, and so forth. So you might choose to take the section they've been assigned for the team and use that to conditionally add their academic and exploratory subjects. I'm going to be using my first team for 7th grade, the one that I assigned to Homeroom 101, and because I have a designation already in biographical, I'm simply going to remove all the students from the team course. Regardless of when you do this, you need to do it at some point so that that team course is out of the students' schedules and they're free for the academic classes that you need to assign them. Okay, now that that course is out of their schedule, I can assign students to the classes they need to take. So on the course add, I can either choose a course or I can choose a specific section. I'm going to do the courses at this point. So if I'm first going to assign courses for that first team, that first 7th grade team, I would pick the first language arts course that's in place, first math course, and so forth. And then I could, let me just do this as an example. You know, go through their academic subjects here, and then also choose the specialty areas they need to take. I could then go to my Edit Condition tab and either select the homeroom that the students have been assigned. Remember, I have students in Homeroom 101, or I've assigned them their team name, so I could choose that here. And apply that. Also, in my student range, the team name is visible once I've assigned it in the biographical area. So if you prefer to use the student range, you could select all the students from a particular team there and then process that. Now, when you're selecting a number of different courses or sections here, be aware that the number you'll see in that confirmation message represents the number of students times however many courses or sections you selected here. So when it says 135 edits have been processed, that means 5 courses times however many students are in that particular team. So again, once you have that team designation for the students, you can use the Mass Edit student course records to put the course requests in the student records or the specific sections that they're going to. For my 8th graders, I want to show you something a little different. For my 8th graders, I have seen scenarios where the students already have course requests in their records before we start splitting them into teams. Most often I've seen this in the high school scenario with the 9th grade academies where the students already have a general course request for English, language arts, math, science, and so forth. Once we've divided them into teams, we can then replace the general course code they've been assigned with the team-specific course code. So all of my 8th graders have this general language arts course in their records. What I'm going to do first, and I'm in my Team 8 filter, I'm first going to go to the Mass Edit student course records and remove Team 8 from their schedules. So I'll go to Course Drop, select Team 8, and process that. Then what I'm going to do is go to my condition and look for team name and choose just the students on the black team. Let me clear this out. And I'm going to go to Course Replace, because here I can tell the system, take that general course the students have been assigned, the General Language Arts 8, and give them the team-specific Language Arts 8. Give them, Team A or Language Arts 8A. And then I could select the general math course they've been given and replace it with the team-specific math course and so forth. So again, I'm replacing the general course code with the team-specific one just for my students on the black team, and I'll process that. I'll then switch this to assign students to the other team-specific course, change the team name, and process that. And now if I look at their schedules, okay, these students, rather than having the general class, have the team-specific course, which will allow me to start scheduling them. So we've created the teams. We've indicated in the biographical area what teams the students are on, and then we can remove that team course from the student records and make sure the students are assigned to the correct team-specific courses, be that a specific course, a different one for each team, or like in my 8th grade example, the students now have either one or the other language arts team course. Now generally in the middle school scenario, the students don't have too much choice as to what they're going to be taking. I have seen some cases where students have a bit of choice when it comes to the electives or the unified arts classes that they're taking. Please be aware that we do have a feature in the course catalog over here to the right where you can allow the students to select alternates for certain courses. So you might indicate that for some of these electives or unified arts, that students could pick an alternate for chorus, and then you can indicate in the column labeled can be an alternate if a course could be selected as an alternate for something else. If the alternates feature is one that you're interested in pursuing, we have a webinar recording on web registration and alternates and how to schedule alternates. So just be aware that that feature is available if it's applicable for your scenario. Again, often at the middle school level, the students don't have much choice, but you can set up your course catalog so that they're able to select alternates for certain courses. Now, before we start venturing into actually scheduling the students into their classes and talking about the options you have there, I'm going to come to the Schedule menu and Operations and create a checkpoint. Checkpoint files are an invaluable tool because what they do is they create a copy of everything related to your schedule at this point in time, and you can restore back to this particular point in time whenever you might need to. So I like to make checkpoint files all throughout the scheduling process, so if something doesn't go the way I intend, I can go back to an earlier point and go from there. So when you create a checkpoint, it tells you what tables it's going to create a copy of. These all relate to scheduling. And each table has a particular code. It starts with a letter that represents that table, and then it actually has today's date. And then you'll see A, B, C, D, depending on, is this the first checkpoint you're creating today, and so forth. In my case, these are all going to end with B because this is the second checkpoint I've created today. The most important part of a checkpoint file is the description you give it so that you know where you were in the scheduling process when you created it. So here, I'm simply going to say, after assigning teams, before scheduling, and I'll process to save that. Now you can go back to one of your checkpoints by going to the Schedule menu, Operations, and Restore from Checkpoint Files. And here's where you'll see the different checkpoints you've created. Now the one I created earlier today was the one that I labeled before creating teams. Now I have the one that's after I've split the students into teams before I start scheduling. And to restore, I would simply select the point in time I wanted to go back to and process. In the staff portal, you also have access to the checkpoint files. That's accessible under Scheduling, Automated Schedule Builder Operations, and Manage Checkpoints. Here I can create a new checkpoint. I can restore from a checkpoint by clicking on the arrow button here, and I can also delete a checkpoint. This is the only place actually where I can delete those checkpoints when I no longer need them, simply by clicking on the red X. So again, I'd recommend creating checkpoint files throughout your scheduling process so that you can go back to any point in time if necessary. Now in terms of actually scheduling the students into the sections, now that you've divided them into teams and assigned them the appropriate courses, you have a number of different options. Some schools will start from scratch each year, and so in the new school year they won't have any sections created, and their goal is to create new sections that will give them the best schedule and assign the students to those sections. If you're starting from scratch, you have the option to use the Automated Schedule Builder. The Automated Schedule Builder will find the best meeting time for each section, and it will schedule the students into those sections. In order for this to be an effective tool, you need to set a number of different parameters in the system, and we actually have a series of 3 different webinars that focus exclusively on the Automated Schedule Builder to demonstrate how to use this tool. So I'm not going to go into detail about the Automated Schedule Builder here. I can tell you that in scenarios where a high school has 9th grade academies, I've seen them use the Automated Schedule Builder to create the sections for the 9th grade academy classes. Typically at the middle school level, I haven't seen this used as much because the middle schools often don't have as much flexibility. with staffing and so forth. But if you're interested in pursuing having the automated schedule builder find the best meeting time for the classes and schedule the students into the classes, again, I'd refer you to the recorded webinars we have on the automated schedule builder. Another tool we have that would enable you to determine when sections should meet is also under scheduling operations, and it's the interactive schedule builder. Here you would select a course. Let me use my 8th grade language arts as an example. So you would select a course and look at the free time tally. And what this will do is show you how many students requested or need to take this course, and for each period of your day when they're free. Using that information, you can then go to the Edit Section Data and actually create those sections. So in my scenario, I already have a section for Language Arts 8A that meets period 6. I'm going to create 2 other sections. Now, I'm just starting off in my scheduling process, so the students are free every period. If I create another section that meets, let's say, period 1, I'll assign the teacher in the room here. And I need a 3rd section to accommodate all of those students. So I'll pick another period during the day, let's say 7th. Once I've created my sections based on the information I saw in the free time tally, I can schedule the students. Now when I click on schedule, the system is only going to take into account the students who requested the course I have highlighted, 186A. And it will take any courses that student has requested or has in their record and look at any sections I have built and attempt to find the best possible schedule for them. So once it's done scheduling, I can look back at the section table and check my numbers. So for this language arts class, very evenly distributed in terms of 28 students in each section. I could view the students themselves. Okay, so this is showing me the students who need to take Language Arts A. And if I see a section number, I see that they've been scheduled into that. I can look at the enrollments here. So there's my 28 students in each section. If I need to make changes to an individual student, I can go into Edit Student Data. And make any individual changes as necessary. The Interactive Schedule Builder also allows you to unschedule students from a particular course. So that would take the students out of any sections of that course and allow you to maybe change the meeting times and so forth. Let me do another example. What I'm going to do is real quick mass assign another course to all of my 8th graders. Let me do art. And my condition is simply going to be grade level is 8. I just want to show you how the Interactive Schedule Builder can be useful as you proceed in the process here. Now when I come back to scheduling operations and the Interactive Schedule Builder and select 8th grade art, now when I look at the free time tally, I'm going to see different numbers because students have been scheduled into the language arts classes. So I have 169 students who need to take that course, and you can see that I don't have all of them available periods 1, 6, and 7 when the sections of language arts meet. So I can use these numbers to determine best when art should meet. And then I can go into Edit Section Data and create sections for my 8th grade art. I'm not going to worry about teachers in rooms right now. Just want to schedule some students into these. I'll just create one more. I know I don't have enough here, but just as an example. And if I don't allow overloads when I schedule here, I can take a look at my enrollment numbers. And the student data. Okay, so here's a student who's already been scheduled into language arts and now is also scheduled into art. And using the interactive schedule builder, I basically kind of craft my own schedule, but I have access to so much information here, I can decide when the section should meet based on when the most students are available and actually schedule them into those classes from here. So the interactive schedule builder is an option, again, if you're starting from scratch in the new school year and need to create all your sections. Another option I've commonly seen used is schools will copy their master schedule, all the meeting times of the various sections, they'll copy those from the previous year to the new year and make adjustments as necessary and then schedule the students into those sections. So if you have a scenario where classes pretty much meet at the same time from year to year, you could use that option and copy the course section table from the previous year to the new year, and then under School, Edit Course Sections, you would come in and make adjustments in terms of, who's teaching those classes this year, what room, do you need to adjust the maximum enrollment numbers, do you need to adjust how many sections you're offering. If you have a small 6th grade class coming up, and last year you had 3 sections of each 6th grade class, maybe this year you're going to adjust that to just 2 sections. But it's very common for schools to copy this master schedule from the previous year to the new year. And then once you have the courses in the student records, you've indicated what it is they need to take, you can use the student scheduler that we use to put the students into the teams. You can use the student scheduler, and the system's going to look at the courses the students need to take, the sections that you've moved over from last year, and attempt to put the students in those classes to make the most efficient schedule. Another tool that schools use is the partial scheduler. One of the advantages of the partial scheduler is that it also will look at the sections that you have in place and the courses the students need to take and put them in those courses, but it's never going to move students from classes they've already been scheduled into. So maybe you went into the interactive schedule builder and you built some classes and scheduled the students into them, and now you're coming to the partial scheduler, to schedule the students into PE or something like that. The partial scheduler will not move the students from any of those classes they've already been put into. It will simply see if it can fit them into those PE classes. I've seen a lot of schools who use a combination of mass editing. So maybe they go to the mass edit area and they assign the students directly into their academic classes. And then for the unified arts or something like PE, they come to the partial scheduler and finish the process. And again, the partial scheduler will keep the students in those academic classes you've mass assigned them into and see, where it can fit them into the unified arts classes or things like PE and health. So partial scheduler is a great tool, kind of towards the end of your scheduling process because it will not move the students from any of the classes they've been scheduled into already. I'm just going to process this to see what kind of results we get. I have all my students selected, so it'll take any of the course requests I've put in place and the sections that are in place and schedule the students accordingly. And let's just look at a couple student schedules. So if there are no sections yet for a course, I'll see no sections. If a student simply couldn't get into a class because it was full or it didn't fit into their schedule because of other things they were taking, we would see the message not scheduled next to that class. So there are a number of different options available to you, everything from using the automated schedule builder to have the system create your master schedule for you, to using the interactive schedule builder so that you can decide when you want the different sections to meet. You could also just move your sections over from the previous year and run the student scheduler or the partial scheduler to put the students in those classes. You have a number of different options based on whatever works best for you. I would just point out that with the student scheduler, when you click the process button here, the first thing the system does is it takes students out of any section they might have already been scheduled into, and it looks to see if it can find a better schedule for them. So if you've already done something like mass edited the students into their academic classes and you're looking to have the system put them in their unified arts classes, the student scheduler, because it initially unschedules students and then attempts to reschedule them, it could possibly move students out of the sections you've assigned them to. So if you want a greater degree of control, you would want to use the partial scheduler at that point. That's the main difference between those two schedulers. Student scheduler unschedules everyone first and then attempts to find the best schedule for the students. Partial scheduler keeps the students in what they're already scheduled into and simply attempts to find a section for them for the other classes they need to take. A report that you'll find useful is under Scheduling, More Scheduling Reports, and the Request Scheduled report. When you print this, it shows you how many students requested each course, how many students were scheduled into that course, and the percent scheduled. So you'll get a sense of how well you're doing with getting students into those different courses. Once your students are scheduled, I had mentioned earlier that if you employ a schedule rotation, you want to wait until the students are scheduled and then activate that. You set up your rotation under the Scheduling menu, More Schedule Editing Jobs, and Edit Schedule Rotation. And what we're seeing here in this first column are the periods in your day, first, second, third, fourth, etc. Across the top, we see how many days are in your scheduling cycle. What you're going to do here is indicate when does the period 1 class meet on each of these days. Now let me show you first an example of like a block schedule. I'd given that example early on with a scenario where you run 4 blocks one day, 4 blocks another day. We set the number of periods to be 8. And so my rotation here would be on day 1, I have blocks 1, 2, 3, and 4. On the second day, I have blocks 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now let me explain why I'm setting it up this way. Again, the left-hand column is the period during my day. Under day 1, I'm indicating what period each of these meets. So on day 1, my first period class meets first, second period is next, third period, then fourth period. On my second day, I want block 5 to meet first, then 6, 7, and 8. And so you might have a scenario where it's just a 2-day schedule and it alternates like this. 4 blocks on the first day, 4 blocks on the second day. Other schools have a schedule rotation where you rotate when the different classes meet. So on the first day, the classes might meet, periods 1 through 8. And then on the second day, maybe my first period class meets second. Okay, and it's actually my 8th period class that meets first. And so I would continue with the other days in the scheduling cycle. So you can set this up to reflect whatever rotation you use for the class periods or the block scheduling, whatever the case may be. And our help documentation on this particular part of the system, explains how you would set that up, and it gives you a few examples, as well as an example of a mistake. And if you have questions on how to set up the schedule rotation, that's something we'd be very happy to help you with in the support department if you called us about that. And then once you've set up the rotation, you can go back again after the students are scheduled to the database configuration and you can activate that. So under scheduling, I can say activate the schedule rotation, and then when I look at the student schedules, now I have the days of my scheduling cycle listed across the top, and it's showing me when art meets on each of those days. So I'll see the rotation reflected when I look at a student schedule, and then when you print the student schedules, you'll also see that reflected. When you print student schedules, you can print them in a grid style or in a line style. Let me do a couple in the grid style. I'll do my students who are on Teams here. So it shows me when language arts meets on each of my different schedule days. So again, you can set up the schedule rotation to reflect whatever your scheduling scenario is. As we saw, my first period class meets first period on the first day, second on the second, third on the third, and so forth. If I do a line style schedule, one of the advantages to the line style schedule is it shows you everything for the whole year. So if you have those rotating exploratory classes or unified arts classes, the line style schedule will give you on one page the the classes the student's taking for the whole year. And with a rotation activated, again, we have the days of the scheduling cycle here across the top. And then for each of my classes, it shows me when it meets on any given day. So there are a number of different tools available to you in terms of configuring a middle school schedule or, as we've talked about, a high school 9th grade academy scenario. You can have the system split the students into teams. You can use that information to assign the students a team name in the biographical area. You can construct your course codes to reflect how you want the students to be grouped throughout the day. You have access to a number of different scheduling tools to construct your schedule and put the students into their sections, and you have the flexibility of creating a schedule rotation that reflects your day-to-day schedule in the school. As you go through the process of scheduling either in the middle school or a high school academy environment, if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call in the support department and we'd be happy to assist you.